G'day guys, I've just returned from the Australian ITC Championships where I took home Best in Faction for Chaos Space Marines. So what I wanted to do was release a 9-part series where I'm going to break down the list that I ran to this event to achieve these results with the new changes that are forced upon the Chaos Space Marine players by Arcs of Omen. I'm going to talk about what changes I made to the list to match this new season and how I went about it, what the list was designed to do, those sorts of things. Then I'm going to do a separate installment for each game that we played in this 8-round ITC major event. And basically I'm going to talk about the list that my opponent ran, the results that we got during the game, and the various strategies and situations that led to those results being achieved. So this will be similar to the Men's Masquerade series that I did after I won that GT, but much longer and hopefully much more interesting in a lot of detail. So with that being said, let's just jump straight into the video.
Welcome to the Black God.
G'day guys, welcome to this 5th installment on my Arcs of Omen Black Legion Australian ITC Championships Best in Faction series. I need to find a way to summarize that to make it a little bit easier. But basically, in this episode, we're going to be talking about a game, we're going to be talking about the list that I versed, and we're going to be talking about the scoreboard, and then all of the various strategies and situations that led to that score. If you haven't seen the first installment in this series, I highly recommend you go back and watch that one first. In that first installment, I break down my list in great detail. I talk about every unit, every warlord trait, every relic, every upgrade. I talk about all of the stratagems and all of the tactics that I plan to use in that video. In this one, I'm going to be talking specifically about this one game, my opponent's list in detail, and then I'm going to talk about what happened during the game and what scores were achieved. So with that being said, let's just talk straight about the list that I versed in my round 4. So I versed Craig Peterson and his Astra Militarum. So he had an Arcs of Omen detachment with the Astra Militarum, and his trait was Born Soldiers. He had a Cadian command squad who had the Final of Nemradesh. He had a First Officer Cadre, a Master Tactician, a Company Commander, the Las Pistol Power Sword, 3 veterans, one of which had a Las Pistol Plasma Gun, one had the Master of Vox, and the other had a Regimental Standard. And he also had an Ogryn Bodyguard with the Brute Shield and Bulgrin Maul. Then he had Lord Solar Leontis with Grand Strategist Warlord trait. He had a Tank Commander with Knight of Piety, a Las Cannon, a Vanquisher Battle Cannon, and 2 Heavy Bolters. He then had 3 units of Cadian Shock Troopers. All of these guys had Las Pistol Chainsword on the Sergeant, Shock Troopers with Special Weapons ×2, and a Shock Trooper with a Vox Caster. He then had 3 units of Kassakan. They're slightly different, so one of them was Veteran Guerrillas, with a Vox Caster, Sergeant, Hotshot Las Pistol, the Barbricant's Key, Battlefield Bequest, Hotshot Las Guns, and a single Kassakan with a Hotshot Marksman Rifle. His second unit had Heirloom Weapons, with Vox Caster, Kassakan Sergeant, Chainsword, Hotshot Las Pistol, 8 Kassakan, Hotshot Las Gun, Frag and Crack Grenades, and 1 Kassakan with the Hotshot Marksman Rifle. Then he had the third unit with Elite Sharp Shooters. They had a Vox Caster, they had a Kassakan Sergeant, he had a Chainsword, Hotshot Las Pistol, the Barbricant's Key, Battlefield Bequest, and a Marksman Hotshot Sniper Rifle. There may be a copy-paste error in there. Apologies if there is. You can see his list on BCP, but yeah, he basically had 3 different units of Kassakan. Then we had a Lehman Russ Battle Tank, Armored Tracks, Executioner Plasma Cannon, Las Cannon, Heavy Flamers on the sides. He had 3 of those, identical loadouts. Then he had 3 Lehman Russ Battle Tanks with Executioner Plasma Cannon, Las Cannons, and Heavy Bolters on the sides. So a total of 7 Lehman Russ chassis and a bunch of Kassakan and Cadian Shock Troops. Alrighty guys, so this was quite an intimidating list. That's a lot of DACA, and things like Illusory Supplication are significantly less effective into Guard because they're generally already only hitting you on 4s or maybe 3s. So being able to become only hittable on 4s isn't quite that relevant. And Guard also don't bring a massive amount of rerolls in this sort of game. So as a result, turning off their rerolls is not that important. But that Terminator unit was absolutely still clutch in this game. So we'll break that down in a moment. But first, let's have a look at the scoreboard. All right, so Craig got a 77-point loss to my 97-point win. For primary, Craig got 24 points and 12 from the sub-primary. He took Inflexible Command for 14 points, Boots on the Ground for 9 points, Retrieve Battlefield Data for 8 points, giving him a grand total of 77. Whereas I got 44 points for the primary, 9 for the sub-primary. I took Warp Ritual, for which I got 12 points. I took Grind Them Down, for which I got 15 points. And I took Bring It Down, for which I got 15 points. Alrighty, so let's have a talk about the way that this game unfolded. So basically, I did the same strategy that I've used in every game so far, which was the Terminators, behind a ruin, characters inside, cultists hidden out of line of sight, everything else in strategic reserves. So all 3 Heck Brutes and the 2 Decimators in strategic reserves, as well as the Raptors. And then basically, Craig got first turn. So he moved out and he made the critical mistake of having his tanks at the front and his infantry at the back. He had infantry hiding behind ruins, etc. I think he was worried that the bolters were just going to shred all of his infantry, so he had all the infantry hidden, and he basically pushed his tanks out into the middle. Then we tick over into my first turn, and I was able to teleport up the Terminators, which failed Illusory Supplication. Not that it's particularly relevant in this matchup, but either way, they failed it. So I teleported them up into the center. I was able to shoot and kill one of his Leman Russ. Then I was able to charge, kill a second one in melee, and then wrap around the third. And then, because I'd bracketed it and it was weakened, in Craig's turn, he went to fall back with that Leman Russ, which he was able to do by using the Desperate Breakout stratagem. But then, after he's completed his fallback move, I was able to spend 2 command points to chase it down using the Slaneshi stratagem, which allows me to consolidate after an enemy unit has successfully fallen back, which meant I was able to tag that vehicle again, which meant that he wasn't able to shoot me. So he wasn't able to put any of his guns into that Terminator unit because it was locked in combat with those tanks. Really, really powerful. And then when we've ticked over into his fight phase, I've blown up that tank as well as tagged another. Then we tick into my turn. I was able to charge. I was able to blow things up, massive amounts of damage. The Heck Brutes came on from strategic reserves. The 3 of them came on one angle. They all shot and were able to kill 2 Leman Russ and a guard squad. There was massive amounts of damage done by those guys. And then the 2 Decimators came up from another angle and killed another Leman Russ. So it was Explosion City. There was tanks going everywhere, and it was an absolute bloodbath. So this was a really, really powerful game. And once again, that trick to be able to pin your opponent, bait them into wasting their CP on Desperate Breakout, and then chase them down anyway, was really, really effective. Now, you could say that this is a bit of a gotcha moment. However, I would argue that if I'm spending 2 command points to do something, it's not necessarily something that I should be encouraged to warn my opponents about, especially given that I do go out of my way at the start of the game to let my opponent know that this is something that I can do. So when I'm talking about my army and the various tricks that I have, I'll be like, yep, these are all my units. These ones all have Mark of Slanesh. Mark of Slanesh allows them to always fight first, and it also gives them access to a stratagem which can make any 6 to hit, wound, or damage an automatic 6. It also gives them a stratagem to chase you when you fall back, and I also have a Black Legion stratagem that allows Terminators to heroically intervene. Like, I go through all of that at the start of the game. So I didn't feel the need to remind him in his, essentially his second turn, that I could do something that we'd had the conversation literally 20 minutes ago. So before people start filling that comment section with, oh, you used a gotcha, it's not a gotcha. He was warned. I think he forgot, to be honest, but it's not a gotcha in that sense anyway. But it was a game-winning move because it allowed me to basically chase him down. And I did it to him twice in that game as well, because then in the subsequent turn, I went off and charged some other stuff, blew that up, and then basically fanned my Terminators out so that they were really close to multiple units, and he wasn't able to move outside of that range, so that when he did fall back, I was able to just go, cool, I'm going to chase you down again, tag you all again, which meant that those Terminators with no Illusory Supplication, no Delightful Agonies, no mutated invigoration, were still able to survive practically the entire game because they just weren't able to be shot. So yeah, that was a really interesting game. It was very interesting to me in that the score was actually still relatively close because the secondaries that the guard have access to are really, really powerful, and you don't necessarily need a large number of units to achieve them. So even though I was blowing up all of his units, he was still racking up quite a few points. Luckily for me, I ran away with the primary because I basically had blown him off all the objectives and was on them myself. So that made it a lot easier. However, his ability to order a tank commander to become objective secured was one thing that he was doing regularly. But yeah, so that was a really interesting game. I hope you enjoyed that brief breakdown of his list, of the scoreboard, and of the game. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. Check out our Patreon where you can pick up shirts like this. We've got objective markers and dice over there, all with the Blog for the Blood God logo on them. We also have a Discord community that's growing rapidly where we do one-on-one coaching, we do training. There's amazing work done in that Discord community. And also, this month we're giving away a free 3D printed Angron. So if you want to get this guy in your hands before the World Eaters Codex even hits the shelves, all you have to do is sign up on our Patreon. That'll automatically enter you into the draw, and you can win this model so that you'll have him in your hands so you can get him built and painted before the Codex is in your hands, so that when it is, you're ready to hit the tabletops on day one. So with that being said, thanks for tuning in, guys, and I will see you in the next installment. Cheers.
Blog for the Blood God.